Hey guys, Peter Franson here from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions with my uncut review of the Season 2 premiere for Carnival Row, Episodes 1 and 2. I'm a little late getting to this. I know it premiered last week, but I had some other things to catch up on. I also wanted to re-binge Season 1 before I really got into Season 2 to refresh my memory. It's been 2.5 or like 3 years. It's been since August of 2019 that the first season came out. So definitely I'm glad that I went back and refreshed my memory. The synopsis for the first 2 episodes of Season 2 of Carnival Row on IMDb reads, lovers Philo and Vignette risk their lives to help the oppressed fae folk of Carnival Row. Okay, that's really, really broad. And for the second episode, when Philo plots to challenge Jonah's hereditary claim to the chancellorship, Vignette intervenes. All right, so what is this thing? Maybe you watched the first season and you're kind of on the fence about whether or not you'll continue based on what that experience was like. I guess that's kind of where I'll try to couch my thoughts right now, because I did enjoy the first season, but I wasn't blown away. And so watching it again was in part to remind me, am I attached to this story? Am I interested in seeing it go forward? And I was interested. I was developing some attachment to the characters, but it took a while in the first season for me to feel embedded in the world and the culture and understand some of the slang and the terminology being thrown around. The advantage of, a second season is having some familiarity with those things and really being able to engage with the story and the characters more and not feel as much like I'm scrambling to figure things out, just basic things about the world. It's still very much a character-oriented story, I would say, but now with less emphasis on budding romances, because now those romances have kind of been established, and so there's still story related to those relationships, but it's more about, okay, now we are committed couples. How are we going to deal together with the situation that we find ourselves in? So it's more on that. It's more on the class struggle and the conflict between two people groups, which are ultimately represented in a more personal way by representatives of those groups, like the Chancellor, like Philo and Imogen, and these different characters. So so it's personalized in that way, the class struggle, and I appreciate that. I need something like that for me to really care about, these broader issues of class struggle and stuff. There's lots of conflict being represented between people groups, both culturally and nationally, as there's still some threat of war and a backdrop of war going on kind of in distant lands. There are major status quo changes for the characters as they come back. In some cases, that's because they're just following up to events that happened at the end of Season 1, but also largely because of new situations that are dramatically introduced in the first episode. So pretty much all characters are adjusting to new situations, and many are showing new sides of their personalities as a result. The elements of political intrigue also continue, just one of many elements of the show. It's not largely a political intrigue show. It just has some of those threads going on, but they feel less complicated to me now that I have established familiarity with the world. And I appreciate that, because I'm normally not even into political intrigue. Orlando Bloom's Inspector Rycroft is struggling to determine what he should do as this sort of man of two cultures and two people. Vignette is taking on the responsibility to sort of save the Fae from their oppressed situation, given that she told so many of them they would be safe as immigrants if they came to the Burg, and yet now they're being horribly oppressed. So she has this burden of responsibility and guilt on her shoulders to really be at the forefront of bringing about change. Imogen and Agreus, they escaped the racism of the Burg only to run into injustice under other powers. I won't get more specific than that, but they're in a very different situation, and I'll even talk about what that means and how their characters come across as a result. Jonah, the son of the previous chancellor, has now taken his father's place and finds himself guilt-ridden over evil choices that Sophie persuades him to make. And so I appreciate just the conflict going on that you can see in his performance, and it turns him from a fairly simplistic character from the first first season, who did have some layers, but I feel like now this element of guilt and hesitancy in the choices he's making makes him a much more engaging and relatable character for me. One that I do want to root for, even though he kind of is on the arguably the villainous side of the spectrum, but it is a spectrum in this show. The one plot that feels a little forced to me and out of place at the start is that of Tourmaline, Vignette's friend and former lover, who finds herself in possession of the powers of the witch-like Haruspex, who died near the end of last season. I'm open to seeing where this goes, but for now it just feels like a plot device forced into the story to just kind of keep Tourmaline involved in the story, to keep that actor in the cast or whatever. I'm not really sure what its relevancy is going to be to the rest of the conflicts and stories going on. So I'm just going to have to be patient for now. But so far, I'm like, I don't know why you're doing this. This feels weird and forced. I learned that the show is ending with season 2. I knew that before the show premiered. And the creators knew this going in. They wrote this season, produced this season, knowing it was going to be the last season. And with that in mind, I'm fairly impressed with what is likely a much more condensed and hurried version of the story they originally intended to tell. Yes, there are major status quo changes at the beginning of the second season, which makes me think, okay, maybe this is the result of them having to kind of really condense and truncate their plans. But at the same time, it doesn't feel especially rushed. There's just that one plot thread with Tourmaline that feels a little bit forced. But everything else, it feels very active. It feels like, whoa, status quo is changing, but it doesn't feel like this radically out of place thing. It's just like, okay, this is a time of upheaval in all of their lives. You know, the characters are complex and flawed, and all of them, including those who were villains or on the villain side of the spectrum last season, are given points of virtue, leaving me very engaged as I develop my own opinions and about the choices being made and having some appreciation for the difficulty the characters have in making them. So I like that it's not easy to love all the characters, and it's not easy to hate any of the characters. You know, I have mixed feelings kind of about all of them, and I really appreciate that kind of moral complexity in writing because it keeps me more engaged as I'm deciding what I think about what's going on and the hard choices that they're making. As far as the cast goes, all returning performers I think continue to be really solid for me, and none of them take me out of the experience with what feel like actor-y choices in the moment. In particular, the actress playing Imogen and Agreus are interesting to watch because they've now been removed from a society obsessed with etiquette, where everything is, they kind of have to keep things buttoned up, and you see some of their true feelings leaking through in their facial expressions. But now they're away from that kind of culture, and even though it's still very much a part of who they are and influences how they see the world, they're very clearly more relaxed and feeling unobserved. And so we're seeing really significantly different performances, I think, from both of them, especially from the actress that is playing Imogen at the beginning of this season. And so I feel like the cast in general continues to really elevate the script with the subtext in their performances that, you know, aren't actually part of the technical words that are coming out of their mouths. And the filming style allows time for that, allows that to be an important part of how these stories and characters are portrayed. And so I really do appreciate that continuing now. As far as stunts and visuals, the sets and costumes continue for me to be wonderfully immersive in their griminess and their felt authenticity to me. I feel like this is a real place in many cases that I could go and visit, and I think I wouldn't want to live there for sure, but I just appreciate all the detail and griminess, the dirtiness of the slum kind of part of the city that much of the story takes place in. The visual effects also seem to be a bit stronger. I'm not sure if I'm imagining that or not. They do seem also a little more plentiful, including wire work that I think has improved some since the first season. So at this point, it really is pretty close to top tier in that realm of premium television. Not the best I've seen, but I mean definitely part of that kind of that caliber. Okay, as far as themes, is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in the themes of this thing that might trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? In both the first episode and the second episode, under different circumstances, but both of them having to do with Jonah, the new chancellor, son of the previous chancellor, there's this idea of seeing the suffering of others for yourself instead of being closed off in your own world. There are characters that are calling Jonah as chancellor to see firsthand the suffering of the Fae, because they believe that that would move him to compassion and to change the policy choices that he is making. Now, I think in watching a story like that, it would be really easy to jump to the political mindset, since that is the content of the show. And maybe it's even the intent in the writing. I have no idea, to kind of move us to think how we in America or other Western countries should change our policies to better consider the poor, the disenfranchised, the oppressed, and things like that. So it would be easy to jump to that, and and if you're kind of tired of that kind of messaging, to kind of shrug and groan and say, all right, well, we've heard this before. But I think that if we do that and jump to the political mindset and just kind of think about it on those terms, on that level, we miss something valuable as Christians when we're just getting caught up in our theoretical opinions about the right versus left politics. As Christians, really, we should think first on a very personal, close-up level. Jesus didn't. I mean, if you read the Gospels, there's nothing I can find about him calling for political reforms and focusing on setting up, donating to, or raising funds for organizations that would help those in need. Now, certainly, the early church was gathering funds, and they were organized in getting those funds to people that were in need. But it starts with the example Jesus set of having a mindset of looking for the people in need within arm's reach. He kept his eye out for people with their individual need and suffering that were literally within arm's reach, and he acted to love them, to help them as he could in their immediate circumstances. This doesn't mean programs and organization should be neglected. And, some people will say, well, that's the government's job, and so we should look to organize that on the government level. Some would say, no, that's for the nonprofits. We should be looking to go there. Okay, well, either one of those, we could have a conversation about that. Again, that's getting caught up in the political and stuff. So I think those things have value. They shouldn't be neglected. We should have those conversations, but I think so often folks on both the left and the right in those conversations keep the conversation and their thoughts focused on that realm of making these broad kind of theoretical policy decisions, when really the conversations we have there should be an outgrowth of the self-sacrificing agape love that we are cultivating, that leads us to seek out eye contact with those who are overlooked and unseen by others, and to be uneasy with the fact of their situations, to the point that we intervene in some way and become a blessing and a help to them in those moments. It's so easy for me to just fill my free time and my mental space throughout the day with shows and games and entertainment podcasts. So I'm really feeling this conviction to reawaken and then also further develop my awareness and compassion for specific people in my life, as well as those I can help through donations and organizational means. All right, I have no idea what your tastes are in TV shows, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, well, watch this. You are invested now after catching up again on the first season, and that makes this story being told in season 2 and the characters all the more interesting and easy to invest in as things change and move to what you now know will be an ending on its own terms rather than an unresolved cancellation. So I really look forward to seeing where things go, where these characters end up when all is said and done. This one is rated TV 16+ for violence, alcohol use, smoking, foul language, and I think the first episode also included nudity, although I don't remember. It must have been really brief and maybe not really explicit, because I don't remember where that fell. But anyway, you can get more information often on imdb.com, so I always recommend that as a resource. But those are all my thoughts for now on the season premiere for Carnival Row Season 2, Episodes 1 and 2. As always, I would love to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click that bell, and do other stuff that you feel led to do to help spread this content around and connect with people that might appreciate it. I want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making so much of my content possible. You can get info about the benefits of joining at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. Then, of course, I hope you'll check out our podcast and stay connected to all CGC content over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.